alert, ballers! What's going on? It's Preacher, and we're looking at the Affliction Warlock for Warlords of Draenor. About to hit the shelves. We're about to get involved. A lot of people are angry at this one. Anyway, we can discuss that today. In fact, when I first looked at it, I believe it was in the alpha of WoD, I gave it a scathing review. I was really nasty about it because it's changed pretty dramatically from its mop incarnation. Now, that's not a bad thing, because in Mists of Pandaria, Affliction is completely broken, and Blizzard seems content to let it ride out until the end of the expansion. They're certainly not going to change it now, that's for damn sure. And what they're doing is just fixing it in Warlords of Draenor. Now, the initial reaction from a lot of players, and still ongoing, I would say, is very negative towards the playstyle, but I'm lucky enough to not play it full time, and certainly not have experience the full advantages of Affliction in Mists of Pandaria. So I've been able to step back and kind of do what I think most Warlocks are going to do, and some are starting to realise is a change of mindset in what certain spells do, particularly with focus on Soul Swap, as the purpose of the spell has changed entirely, and that's something people are really struggling with, because in Mists of Pandaria, you essentially had the Soul Swap button bound to everything, and then you would just win the day. So very, very difficult and completely understandable why people are pissed about that. In terms of gameplay, it's changed quite a lot. You no longer have things like Malefic Grasp. I am sad to see that go. And because dot snapshotting has been removed, which was the main focus of Affliction, was to get super powerful dots and keep them rocking and rolling, it was removed and got rid of. And now you're basically just standing and channeling. And this is a genuine issue. A genuine issue is that you're just spending so much time not refreshing dots because of procs. You no longer really need to watch that, except for when your haunts are going to go off. I will point out I'm wearing the set bonus on the footage you're seeing in the background, which gives you so many soul shards, it's almost ridiculous. It generates them through the roof, and therefore you can keep up almost consistent haunt. But it gives you an idea of what your raiding Warlock will look like, is the purpose. So that's what's going on there. Now, in regards to the dot snapshotting removal, many people tied the fact that Soul Swap now has extra shard costs to the point of trying to fix dot snapshotting and the power that generated. But they went too far. With dot snapshotting gone, there was no need to apply this soul shard cost to Soul Swap, which effectively, and this is true, makes Soul Swap pointless in many, many ways. You're giving up a haunt for Soul Swap, and when you do the math on it, you're going to take 2 global cooldowns to use the Soul Swap. It's going to cost you a shard that don't save you much time. It's a very, very, very minor saving of an unstable Affliction cast, which is 0.9 of a second in my gear right now. So, yeah, you're saving you're saving like half a global cooldown, which makes it completely worthless. Common sense tells you I'd rather have a haunt up. Simple as that. So, although it's definitely true that Soul Swap, which if you're not sure what I'm talking about, copies your dots so you can put them onto another target without losing those dots on one target. Yes, Soul Swap was initially designed with the intention to allow you to multi-dot targets very, very quickly. They've sort of reworked it. And this is where I think it's a change of mindset. You have to think about it in a different way. If you're coming to multi-dot, Soul Swap is worthless. It is. It's just worthless. It's not used for that anymore. They've decided that was probably too powerful just to keep people moving dots around. It removes a lot of the skill level of Warlocks, I believe. I truly believe that as somebody who mained a Warlock several times. Yeah, they removed a lot of the skill of actual multi-dotting and keeping those dots up. Because multi-dotting is still very, very, very powerful for an Affliction Warlock. As it should be. It's a dot-based spec. And it should be a difficult thing to do. If you do it right, you get huge benefits. You screw it up, you don't. It's as simple as that. What Soul Swap is really good for is planning when you need to kill something very, very quickly. And that's where it really starts to shine. Because where we're doing the math on just multi-dotting and saying, oh, well, I'm saving half a global cooldown, when it comes to very, very quickly switching to ads and then having to nuke them very quickly, you're actually saving a lot more time. Because the way you work it is, oh, I've got an ad coming up in a few seconds. I can Soul Swap Inhale, so I've got the dots ready to go. Carry on doing my single target damage. Ad spawns, instantly dotted it up, saved plenty of global cooldowns there, and then could go to town on that motherfucker and start going to work on it. And that's when Soul Swap's like, oh, okay, I get it now. That's kind of what it's for now. That's the way we need to think about it. And when you think about that, it's a huge weight off your shoulders because it's like, okay, I get it. It's a situational thing rather than something I'm supposed to use all the goddamn time. That's cool. It was really a quality of life change. It's got to be said. I think Warlock's Affliction, particularly Mists of Pandaria, had a very easy time. Am I going to get lynched for saying that? Maybe. But yeah, they had a very, very easy time. And Blizzard obviously wasn't happy with that. They weren't happy with the results you were getting from doing such things. And therefore, they've reworked it. It's as simple as that. This is how it works now. The issue of channeling is one that's going to crop up very, very quickly for a lot of players. And that is that you are turreted. In fact, one of the main complaints coming out of the Warlock forums, on the official forums, on MMO and other websites, is movement. Now, I personally don't have a great issue with it. I understand where people are coming from, because Fell Flame is gone, which was like the go-to movement spell. But with Affliction, you do have always the option of 2 instant cast spells to be using on the move. Kill Jaden's Cunning is pretty much worthless, and the talent system we'll talk about in a sec could use some reworking. But you always have the option to refresh an Agony, refresh a Corruption every time you move, and that's not that bad. It's not that bad. It's not perfect. It's not ideal. No one's ever going to say that. But you do have other movement options if you're going to Demonic Teleport, if you're going to use a Gateway, depending on if you can plan it that way. But you do have options. I understand that they're not as good as some other classes. That's a granted. We don't have instant cast procs, which is why it would have been so much better, I believe. We asked for it, we begged for it, is for Drain Soul to be removed or go back to its execute style and bring back Shadow Bolt. I think we would have been much happier with Shadow Bolt and Nightfall probably returning to some sort of either Haunt or instant cast Shadow Bolt. Something with Soulburn, something like that. I do feel, on a personal note, I would say Soulburn seems to be vastly underpowered these days, and there's a missed opportunity there to make it do so many more things. I'm basically only using Soulburn now for Seed of Corruption, and that's pretty much it. Although it will be said that Soulburn Haunt, especially when you can generate as many shards as you can in your tier gear, seems to be the go-to DPS spec. So that brings us nicely onto the talent system, I guess. I think Soulburn has so much potential to do so many cool things, and it just doesn't seem worthwhile. It really doesn't seem worthwhile. You're certainly not going to be soul burning a soul swap anytime soon. That's unlikely to happen until you can guarantee shards. Even at the start of a fight, it doesn't really seem worthwhile to waste a shard on that instead of having another haunt. Just saying. Just saying. So, onto the talent system. Generally, I'd say the first few tiers of the talents are actually okay. They're okay. You have plenty of choices, many of which you can use pretty regularly. Especially in the new 5-man content, which is slightly more difficult. I was underusing Shadow Fury after I rewatched my footage just to check some things. I should have been using Shadow Fury much more. But other than that, Burning Rush, Unbound Will, Blood Horror, Sacrificial Pact, Mortal Coil, Howl of Terror, they all have their place and all have their purpose. When it comes to the Grimoires, I kind of wish they were a little bit more interesting. I prefer Grimoire of Service, where I can summon an extra pet, an extra bit of a DPS boost, and all that kind of stuff. It does seem to me that Sacrifice is doing particularly well. And ultimately, Supremacy, as cool as it is to have the new looking pet, but we've kind of got used to it now, and therefore it's like, it does what it does. I will point out, though, as a great note to Warlocks in general, is that really accurate Fell Hunter control. Oh god, it's so beneficial in the new 5-mans. I was doing most of the interrupts and most of the purges all the time. It was really good to make sure you got those key binded and ready to go. It's really nice how Command Demon works now, and it's just a standard spell. Fantastic. Fantastic. Now, moving down to the level 90 and level 100 talents. Given the changes in the game currently, Kil'jaeden's Cunning and Manaroth's Fury arguably Manaroth's Fury has its situational uses, but Archibald's Darkness is just so good that it dwarfs the other two in comparison. Particularly for Affliction, as I said, you do have choices of things to do on the move, making Kil'jaeden's Cunning pretty much worthless. I tried it out a couple of times because I do like it, but it's hard to deny that having 2 Dark Soul charges, especially in 5-man content, which is the only thing I can test with this right now, is really good. Really very, very good, and it's just so difficult to deny its power, especially as you build up your gear to get these set bonuses, so you have like double Dark Soul and permanent haunts up. It's a huge boost, and it needs some sort of reworking there. I think it's such a boring passive, and it's too powerful. Whereas Killjaden's Cunning should be better, as you have to think about it and use it. And Manoros Fury, well, it does its job, but I haven't seen a single raid encounter where it will be useful. And that's what makes it a little bit sad. I haven't seen a single raid encounter where you would want to use Manoros Fury. I've tried them all. I'm trying to think on the top of my head, even Darmok. All those ads are grouped up, and therefore it's pretty useless unless you're trying to DPS spears for some reason to pad your damage, which is what Warlocks tend to do sometimes, let's be honest. As for the level 100s... yeah, Demonic Servitude seems really good on paper. It's not. And I said this in the earlier video. Just having a permanent Doomguard seems great on paper, and a permanent Infernal seems great on paper, and actually looks great. You're walking around with Infernal and Doomguard. But Cataclysm is so much more interesting. So much more interesting. And even has possibilities for Soulburn to work with it. I would have liked to have seen that. But it deals tremendous damage, a great single target boost, and applies Agony to everything, which I think is absolutely fantastic. It is a huge bummer. I would like the damage to probably be nerfed. If its cooldown was more in line with Agony, that would be really nice. So that it's not a case of Warlock AOE is very, very, very strong within about the duration of Agony. You have really ridiculously strong AoE, dropping Agony on every target. Obviously a Soulburn, Seed of Corruption, so everything's got Corruption. Throwing out more Seed of Corruptions on top of that, and some Unstables mixed in. It would have been nice if the actual landing damage was nerfed, and maybe just give us a little bit of Agony. But other than that, short-term bursty AoE, Cataclysm is absolutely glorious and a nice single target boost. Unfortunately, like I said earlier, Soulburn Haunt seems to be what's going to win, and that's really sad, because Servitude and Cataclysm are far more interesting. They're far more interesting than grant Soulburn Haunt. Your Haunt spell also increases the damage of your damage over time effects. Great. It's boring. Flat out damage increases are just boring. And again, it comes down to the hypocrisy of Blizz saying that, we don't want talents to just flat out increase your damage. Yeah, Soulburn Haunt then? So, where did that come from? If that's the ideology behind things, I don't know. In terms of Affliction being super boring to play, it's just different. The more I play it, the more I kind of get used to it and I go, okay, I can get back into this. It certainly feels horrible, in my opinion, on single target. On single target, it feels absolutely horrendous because there is nothing else to do than apply dots and basically AFK until you need to refresh dots. And there's no getting away from that. It's horrible. And it really does boil down to the fact that it's so channeling based that you're just a turret. And that's it. When you start mixing in the multi-targets, when you start having some dot management coming in, that's where Affliction should be. And it's very different to Mists of Pandaria, which I think people are having a hard time with. Maybe more the re-rollers. Of course, with the power of Warlocks in Mists of Pandaria, there have been understandably lots and lots and lots of people who've re-rolled and perhaps never played the classic style of Affliction, which was dot management. Dot management on multi-targets is where it really shines, and it's coming back that way. I'm okay with it. After playing it a bit more, I'm okay with it. It's just a crying shame, in my opinion, that it's all the filler is boiled down to one spell, which is just boring as tits. Yeah? And that's a real sadness, because as soon as you get down to single target, if it's super power, if Affliction turns out to be the best DPS spec for single target, it's boring as fuck. Even Destruction is more interesting, and that's saying a lot, because Destruction is... It has its stigmas, and the Warlocks know it, is that it's super gimpy, arcane, old school arcane, I would say. Old school arcane to play. And Affliction ain't much better. Without dot snapshotting, very difficult to shine or even go wrong with that. And players like places where you can go wrong with that. If where you're going to go wrong is your dot fell off, well, that's just about as lazy as it's going to get. Lazy as it's going to get. It does boil down to, ultimately, hey, do you have a big DPS proc? Do you have big trinket procs? Then let's go ahead and throw a haunt on that son of a bitch and see what happens. But as the gear does progress and you do get your tier gear, that will become far less relevant. It's almost interesting to see that the set bonuses provided by the current first tier of Warlock gear reduce your skill level in some fashion. And they do. There's no getting away from that. They slightly reduce your skill level. I'll just read them for you because I'm sure some of you are curious as I come to the conclusion here. Drain soul on a target afflicted by corruption, unstable affliction, and agony. So you have all three dots up, which you should do. Increases nightfall by 5%, so more shards. And when nightfall activates, the cooldown of dark soul is reduced by 10 seconds. So you get your dark soul back up again. Both very boring, and both actually take away from the interest of the spec, in my opinion. So there you go. AOE and multi-dotting is where it's going to shine. People are going to have a problem adjusting to that, especially with the changes to soul swap and having to use it in a different way. Single target, though, it's incredibly dull. It's very, very dull. There's nothing of interest going on. Your dots will automatically update, and therefore you just have to keep them on. And that's it. Nothing special, nothing interesting. Kind of sad. Let's have a Shadow Bolt back, please. Shadow Bolt is so much more fun. Instant proc Shadow Bolts are so much more fun and allow things to do on movement. Hey! Alright, guys. Affliction Warlock. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.